All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a really exciting conversation planned for you today. So before we get started, I just want to first of all introduce myself. My name is Adriana Stanovic, and I work for YMCA of the USA. And we'll share a little bit more about the work that we're doing and collaborating with DFA. But I'm on our diversity, inclusion, global, and multicultural development team, and working on some pretty exciting stuff. So we're excited to share. If you're just joining us, please share where you're calling in from in the chat so we can all get to know each other a little bit. I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit about our work. DFA has actually been partnering with the YMCA for a few years now, and a big part of what we've been working on has been focused around change makers and thinking through the question of how do we engage, empower young people to be change makers in their communities. So we've actually been working with 13 DFA teams from across the country on a variety of really exciting projects. And we'll share one element of our change maker work that's also global with you today, but just know there's a lot more work. And Alden, maybe you can share the link to the page, your website, that outlines a few more of those details. So we're really excited to be here with you today. So you are attending a Spark Series event. Welcome, if you didn't know that already. So I just want to do a quick plug for the next one, which is our wonderful guest speaker, Kim Hunt of Pride Action Tank, who will focus on policy work from a lens of reflecting the needs of communities. So that'll be really exciting. And Alden will share the link in the chat box as well. She'll also share a link to stay connected to the newsletters and Slack channel for other conversations like this around social impact and how do we make it work through partnership and collaboration. And then just a couple Zoom logistics. So one, if you would like to see our closed captions, and if it helps you to see the words, you can go to closed captions and turn on your subtitles, and you should be able to see that. So please use that if you'd like. We invite you to use your videos and turn on your cameras if you would like to, and if you're comfortable, and if you just want to take a break, that's okay too. You can use the chat to suggest any additional resources that come up as we're talking today, and we are recording today's conversation so we can share more widely. So that's a little bit of the logistics before we jump into the fun stuff. So as you know, the Spark series is a space to just have conversations across different networks and groups as we're thinking about how do we make social impact and what are the key components to make an impact in community. So today we're going to share an example of our YMCA Youth-Led Solutions Initiative, which is a global initiative that we'll talk about in just a minute. So as we get started, I will introduce, we have 3 of us that are participating today from the YMCA. The first is Tom Valentine, who is at YMCA of the USA with me, and Tom is our Vice President of International. And the second is Eleanor Yuan, who was a participant and a delegate that formed a solution team in our Youth-Led Solution Summit, and she'll speak a bit from her experience. So before we hear from them, I just want to give you a quick overview of the YMCA and our reach. So you may know, and many of you may be familiar with the Y in the US, and you know we're all over. But what you may not know is that we also have a significant global presence. So in addition to serving 9 million young people and 13 million adults each year in the US in 10,000 communities, we also have a presence in 120 countries, serving more than 45 million people. So one of the best kept secrets about the Y is that we are part of a global network, which also gives us the opportunity to really scale our initiatives and collaborate on a deeper level across borders and across cultures, which then just enriches our own work nationally. So one of the really exciting initiatives that we started working on last year is called the Youth-Led Solutions Summit, and I'm going to turn it over to Tom to give us some framing. I will add within that, Tom was sort of one of the executive sponsors that helped us start to build this idea from the ground. I served as the coordinator that led a planning committee of young people from around the world. So we had 2 young people from each region. I was one of the US representatives, but there were 2 folks from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America and the Caribbean. So really having global representation. And then Eleanor is one of the students that participated in the event. So you're really going to get to see and learn a little bit about at all different levels how this initiative worked. So Tom, with that, I will turn it over to you. And if you could just help frame a little bit of how this idea came about and what we did.
Thank you so much. And let me just begin by saying how excited I am to be here and to learn and connect with all of you. We're very passionate about young people leading global transformation to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so building more bridges across organizations and cultures around the world is extremely important. So what I'd like to begin with is just by stating that 2 years ago in 2019, the YMCA celebrated its 175th anniversary in London, England. And it was a transformational event, not because of the importance of celebrating our anniversary, because that at the end of the day is the history. But what was exciting about it is it was an event that was completely designed and organized with over 4,000 young people by young adults. And it was all around, what is the world that we want to see? How do young people want to lead global transformation? And we heard loud and clear from the voices of young people that they're very interested on several key topics, but three that rose to the level of top prominence were climate action, youth employment, and mental wellness. And so one of the challenges that we have in the YMCA movement, both in the United States and globally, is that we're wonderful at providing lots of services to young people. We help young people grow from early childhood up into adulthood, but we haven't been as proactive and as effective in empowering young people to lead the change that they want to see. And so this is a really important inflection point for us, a pivot point, where we can really work more proactively with young leaders to advance the change. And through that, by a group of young adult leaders, we designed the Youth-Led Solutions Initiative. And so the intent of the Solutions Initiative is to give young people the agency and the vision to create solutions that will advance progress for themselves, their YMCAs, and their communities, but over the long term, advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And through that initiative, we've been partnering with a wide range of corporate, academic, and UN and multilateral organizations. As we see in this side, we have the UN Special Envoy for Youth, who's been present with us on 2 occasions now to help inspire young people about the importance of leading this change for a greater global impact. So if we can go to the next slide, Adriana. Essentially, as we look to the future, we really want to talk about what are some key areas where we can bring together groups of young people to look at some of the key actions that they're already leading in these topics, to learn from different experts and organizations and young leaders in the field, and then start to design and develop new solutions that they can then activate at the grassroots in their communities through their YMCA platforms. So the first Youth-Led Solutions Summit that we organized focused on youth-led climate action. It took place virtually in the month of October. We had over 700 young participants from 50 countries. And collectively, we were able to then support many of them to lead grassroots change through seed grants. And you're going to hear about one of those seed grants a little bit later. But one of the things that we thought was very important is once we empower young people with knowledge and networks and skills, it's critical to also give them resources so that they have the mandate to then go and lead that change in their community. And as we look to the future, over the course of this year and then also next year, we'll be organizing another range of this year virtual summits focused on the youth-led future of work and mental wellness and well-being. And then next year at our 2022 World Council of YMCAs, which will take place in Denmark, we'll have a hybrid event where we bring together all the different solutions that young people have been leading based on their seed grants to talk about what can we do as a YMCA movement to take our impact to an even higher level. One of the really important principles of these solution summits has been that we've wanted to intentionally engage other youth organizations and young leaders in the process. We have so much to learn together as we build bridges for future change. So that's a quick overview of what the Youth-Led Solutions Initiative is about. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Adriana and Eleanor to talk a little bit more about what this actually looks like at the grassroots from the perspective of a young leader that participated.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tom. So, Eleanor, I'd love to have a few questions for you just to learn a little bit more about your experience as well. But if you could just start by giving us a bit of information just about your background and tell us about your team and how was it participating in the summit and what are you all working on?
Yeah. So, hi, my name's Eleanor. I'm a student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I'm majoring in global environmental science and economics. So, I'm really, really interested in sustainability, and that is what caught my interest for this project. It's focused on sustainability. So, most of my project team members are from the YMCA. We're all heavily involved. In fact, I'm on the student board for the Atherton YMCA, which is our college YMCA for University of Hawaii. And we're all really, really interested in sustainability and working towards youth-led solutions. So our project is on e-waste, and we were really fortunate enough to gain the seed grant after attending the summit, and we're using the grant to organize events so that we can collect e-waste from the community in addition to develop educational materials to give out to the rest of the community, the general public. And we first identified this problem because we noticed that there was a lot of e-waste on the side of the streets that were obviously improperly disposed. And we were worried that the general public is basically unaware that e-waste improperly disposed has a negative impact on the environment. So we really wanted to help change that and give them an outlet for them to submit their e-waste for free too. So that is how we came up with the idea. And most of us, as I mentioned earlier, are really involved with the YMCA. So the YMCA is a really great place to find like-minded people who are willing to do the grunt work and willing to serve the community in that way. So it was really great. We were able to gather a whole bunch of students like me. And attending the summit was really interesting because we were able to connect with youth who are like us around the world and see their perspectives. And one thing that we noticed was that a lot of their issues that they were also pointing out were prevalent in our community as well, but just phrased a little differently in a little different context and maybe with different importances. So we thought that was really, really interesting. And in fact, we were able to connect with some students who regularly do e-waste drives and do their own e-waste events and gain some tips from them. So that was really, really useful. And I think overall with world conferences and world summits, it's always really, really interesting to connect with people who have different backgrounds, who have different cultures, and grew up in different societies, and hence they have different worldviews. So it's always really interesting to connect with those students. And yeah, I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to share with you guys and to also participate in the World Summit Solution and obtain that seed grant. And our solutions team is currently working on organizing that e-waste event to collect all the e-waste and also create educational pamphlets to distribute to the general public. And we're really excited for the fruit of those, the hard work. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Eleanor. And you're getting a ton of love in the chat box. Apparently a bunch of people had to look up e-waste and what that is. I think people have it by now. They've caught up. Alden is asking any tips for e-waste for us, Eleanor.
Yeah, so one thing that we noticed in our community was actually there are some decent e-waste programs, but they're just not widely advertised. And you really have to dig for them. And, you know, government websites, they're not always the prettiest to look at. So one solution that we came up with was really to gather all those things together in something that maybe looks a little nicer, and hopefully we can give it to the general public. And yeah, information access is really important, making sure that people know that resources are available. Yeah.
Thanks, Eleanor. So that's like one example, and Eleanor is a superstar on our U.S. solution teams. But just to give you a sense of what other teams are doing, so in the U.S. we have a YMCA, the only YMCA that sits on a Native American reservation, the Sioux YMCA, which focused on food waste and also. So reducing food waste and addressing food insecurity. On the flip side of the coin, our Long Beach YMCA did something very similar. The East Jerusalem YMCA in Palestine, they focused on seed distribution for community members to start their own community gardens and to have access to just a healthier food. In Kenya, the team is focusing on youth training around bamboo manufacturing as an alternative, as a green alternative material, and is also looking at the supply chain and how they can promote more bamboo as a material because it's better for the environment. Scotland is really focusing on advocacy and policy. They're doing a series of events and elevating youth leadership as an important component of COP26, which is the United Nations Climate Change Conference coming up in November in Scotland. They're hosting, so that was a big part of their focus. Taiwan is looking at green tourism and how to make tourism more environmentally friendly and sort of alternative tourism. So as you can see, the projects are really a wide variety of anything from programs to events to education campaigns to policy advocacy to trying to influence existing systems. So I think that's been one of the really key focuses of the summit is there's no, and I think this is a huge part of the design process, right? There's not just one thing or one direction we can move in. It's all about what's the need, how are we centering the users of what the solution is, who are we looking to impact, how are we elevating their voices? So that's a really key focus of the summit as well. Tom?
Yeah, and just to build on a few things that are being shared, challenges like climate action require a global response. And so it's not enough for us each to do one thing from one country or have one advocacy strategy. We really have to have a larger vision of how we can actually activate our enormous global work around the world in a common direction. So even right now, this is leading to some conversations we had this morning with the organizers of the COP26 for the YMCA around, do we need a global Green New Deal for the YMCA movement? Is there something that we can all commit to as individuals, as institutions, as organizations involved in municipal, state, national, and global advocacy to have a greater collective impact? And it's all about that collective impact where the grassroots change is also part of a larger global change, which is so exciting. And again, the cooperation across borders and cultures is so exciting. The Ann Arbor YMCA is actually partnering with their partner in the Philippines and Albay on common grassroots education programs that they're both involved in, but they're doing it together to share the reality from both Michigan and the Philippines at the same time, which is a great cultural learning opportunity.
Thanks, Tom. So Eleanor, one more question for you before we transition to sort of sharing next steps and Q&A. This is new for the YMCA to really look at not being a service provider to young people, but to being a platform and a convener to access networks and resources and funds to invite young people to the table to sort of be connected to all these different resources that you need to take action locally. So can you just share from your perspective, like, why do you think it's important for organizations like the Y or any of the other folks on here, right? Even from a DFA perspective, for anyone that's working on any projects or any solutions that are community-based, why do you think it's important to elevate youth leadership or to have young people as part of the design of those solutions instead of just being brought in as a stakeholder group after the fact, or to be a group that receives those services? Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really great that the YMCA is aiming to do that. And I think the YMCA is a really great community. As I mentioned a little earlier, all of us at the YMCA who are heavily involved are really willing to serve the community and work on these solutions. And you can say, not slackers. We're not here to, just get some community service hours. We're really here to see a difference in the world and in our community. And it's really exciting to be able to receive funding so that our impact can grow. As you know, money money is not something that us college students have. So it's really, really great. It can help us, just a little money can really help us elevate our events and our impact for all the solutions that we want to create. And I think it's really great to connect students across the world, because we can exchange these ideas. And I think in the comments or in the chat that I saw, someone pointed out that it's really interesting that everyone or most of the people that we talk to in the world, and especially in our small groups, we were able to find some crossover and some issues that we have all in our own communities, just a little bit adapted to each of our communities. And I just think it's interesting to expand our perspective, and with that, hopefully we'll be able to be better leaders in the future and solve these really enormous issues like climate change.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. So, you heard an example of our first summit, Climate Action. We learned a lot. It was actually supposed to be in person in San Francisco in June. Anybody want to guess what happened? Just kidding. We all know. So we had to pivot too as a planning committee in the midst of being furloughed for 2 months, having folks that were staff that were either laid off or were struggling with personal, themselves being affected by COVID, either economically or physically, having family members. It's a really difficult time to also think through of how do we contextualize these. I mean, climate change and climate action is always important, as are the other topics that Tom elevated, and we know they're important to young people. How do we put them in the context of COVID too, and move forward, even if it looks really different than what we had originally planned? So we went forward and ended up doing a virtual event in October, which actually taught us a lot about what were some of the barriers of having an in-person event that we no longer had to worry about, and really open up access to, it was a free event. It was open to anybody. We really were able to have a lot more participants and perspectives because we went virtual. And I think that lesson too of how important connectivity is, especially during times of intense crisis and disruption and uncertainty, and how valuable those relationships are, and access and connection to networks across borders is a really important lesson for us. So we're still learning. It was not perfect by any means, and we're actually in the process of planning the next summit, which Tom will share about a little bit. I will add that we did incorporate design elements to the first one. We had a solution team packet that helped walk solution teams through a design thinking methodology to come up with their solutions. Some solutions that they brought were existing and they wanted to expand them, and others started from scratch. So that was really interesting to learn about. This time, the World YMCA also hired a consultant to specifically work on a design thinking methodology with the planning committee, and envisioning just the next iteration of the summit, and how we can continue to evolve based on lessons learned and adapting to the topics, recognizing that they're all different. So the structure also needs to evolve as we move on. So that's been a really interesting perspective to share. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you just to share a little bit about the next topic that we're focusing on and why it's so relevant, especially now.
Great. So the next Youth-Led Solutions Summit is going to dive more deeply into the future of work. And as you all know very well, the COVID pandemic exacerbated already unacceptable disparities for young people and people of color around the world. And there's no greater challenge right now than youth unemployment. And so we wanted to be addressing a theme which is both timely and important. Young people want decent work. They want an opportunity for meaningful employment. There is radically different access in the US and around the world to education, to employment opportunities, even to understanding what are future work trends, and how might I, as a young person, position myself for new, exciting job opportunities. And so we're going to take a deep dive into the future of work. We have several partners, including the International Labour Organization, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, that are also going to share content with us. We're expecting over 1,000 young people from 100 countries to participate. They will also be showcasing many of the innovative things they are doing as either a local YMCA or a group of young people. Youth entrepreneurship is a big part of it. And we will be diving more deeply into different growth areas for the future of jobs. So the creative economy, the green economy, and the care economy. So the young people, again, will come together. There'll be opportunities for learning at the virtual summit. And then afterwards, they will form into solutions teams at the grassroots in their countries. And there will be, again, another opportunity for seed grants to then activate opportunities for new job creation or entrepreneurship for young leaders. One thing I wanted just to share around all the youth-led solution summits is, and I'm sure this has been a theme in many of your conversations this year, is that equity and our long history of racism are cross-cutting themes in everything. Whether you're looking at climate justice, whether you're looking at unemployment, whether you're looking at mental wellness and trauma-informed care, all of that is framed by the historic systems of racism and oppression that we have both in the US and globally. And so in every one of these summits, it's really important that we look at some of these root causes of systemic lack of access, and that will certainly figure in very prominently in the June Solution Summit. But we welcome the participation of other young leaders from other organizations and groups. And again, I think in particularly for this summit, the importance of design thinking and design-based strategies will be very important for the future success of the teams.
Thanks, Tom. So I know we shared a lot and you got a lot of insights, but we also want to leave some time for Q&A and just to hear from you all what questions you have. If any particular pieces resonated or you're curious, this is that time. So we'll while you're doing that, you're welcome to either put it in the chat or to let us know. And I know we already have a question in the chat, so maybe I'll pause here for a second. Does anyone want to ask a question? All right, I'll go to the question in the chat and then we'll come back to the group. So Eleanor would love to hear about what you hope the future of work looks like for yourself and other youth change makers.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think in times of COVID, we've especially seen people can really branch out. And I think more recently, there's definitely been a lot more independent thinking, and there's a lot of jobs that you probably wouldn't have imagined that are there. And I'm really, really excited for that. I think I'm not well versed in this topic, but I do think that our youth today are really motivated and driven, and I'm really excited for these systemic inequities that Tom were talking about to really be mended a little bit. And I think with our generation, it can definitely be mended a bit.
Thank you, Eleanor. You're getting some confetti fanfare from Alden. She liked your answer. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll can I promote the question that I put in the chat to Tom and
Yes.
Eleanor? I'm always curious. I would love to know from both of your perspectives, is for students, or sorry, for young people who haven't had the opportunity to fully be involved with the YMCA as a platform, what type of support, what are the entry points we can do to start to help people and provide young people with the support that they're looking for? And so I guess it's what are young people seeking and need from us so that they feel empowered to be making change?
So I would love to kick us off, and maybe Eleanor or Tom, if you have thoughts to share after that. I think number one, we all have our areas of influence. We all are working on committees or working for organizations or institutions. Our students, we all belong to something where we have some say. So one, very simply asking ourselves, who's at the table? who's missing, what perspectives do we need? Are we trying to solve for a certain group without them? And I know that that's a key focus too of the design process, right? Nothing for us without us. And I think that's a really, it's easier said than done. Like, trust me, we know. And as I think, especially the higher up that you go, or the bigger the organization is, it's just harder to have that grassroots connection. But I would say starting there within everyone's area of influence of what, especially with young people, although really the advice can apply to any number of groups that aren't represented, do we have that voice here? And beyond that, I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. We're not experts in employment and entrepreneurship, so we're partnering with the International Labor Organization. We are experts in youth engagement and youth empowerment. So also looking in your community of what are those organizations like the Y that are providing opportunities. I will share, you asked about young people that aren't connected to the Y. And not every young person has access to YMCA. We know that. I think now with the advent of virtual gatherings as well, there's a lot more opportunity to connect. I'll share one other initiative in addition to the Youth Summit, which also, by the way, is open to anyone, whether they're affiliated with the YMCA or not. They're welcome to attend, and that's still a space for them. But the YMCA is also partnering with 5 other global youth serving organizations globally and the World Health Organization to elevate young people as important leaders of a COVID response and resiliency globally. So there will be, we're happy to share with the DFA networks as well some opportunities for both some online summit learning and connecting, as well as some seed funding that can go directly to young people through this process. So there are opportunities out there. I think recognizing what are our strengths and how can we leverage them. And for DFA, it's the design thinking process, right? You're not youth experts, and that's okay. You don't need to be. So one, what's our area of influence? How do we have a critical eye on who's missing? And then 2, how do we find the partners that can help us get to where we want to be? Eleanor, Tom, anything to add?
I think it's pretty good. I just to add a little bit. I think that to reach the people outside of the YMCA, really making sure that each community is well aware of the support that they have. I find it, from my perspective, I feel like people who want to get involved in the community are willing to do so. They just have to see the opportunities. So really presenting the opportunities in front of them, letting them know that there are these resources is, I would say, maybe the most crucial step. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thanks, Eleanor. So we also have a really interesting question we have a few different questions, but I'll go to the one from Katie. This one goes to Tom. I'm thinking a lot about Tom's statement as moving the conception of the Y from a service provider to a platform. I'm wondering if you could speak a little more to that, especially because Y branding is so closely connected to what we recognize the Y as. I can see programming as obviously part of this transition, but if you could help paint a fuller picture about what that looks like.
Sure. Well, in many folks have probably participated in a YMCA program or camp in the past. We have a huge impact on young people around our country. Close to 10 million young people under the age of 18 every year. But one of the things that we've heard loud and clear from conversations from our youth and government leaders or our other Youth Institute late teen leaders is that they're very clear about the agenda for change that they want to lead. And it's really critical that we give more space for them to come up with innovative solutions and ideas, or to engage them in advocacy strategies, or give them a seat at the board level, whether it's locally or within the context of a larger city YMCA. Where can young people share their voice about where they'd like to see the YMCA investing resources in leading change? One interesting idea that came out of the San Francisco Y was that their project was actually to create a youth-led task force on environmental responsibility that would actually audit and monitor all that they're doing around energy use and recycling and waste management in the YMCA to come up with a broader strategy. And suddenly all these young leaders who tended to be more frontline staff or not at the highest levels of decision making, were now empowered to come up with solutions and strategies that would help the YMCA and help them become more environmentally sustainable. It's a work in progress, but these are the type of, I think, actions where we need to kind of change internally to think more strategically. How are we really benefiting from the wisdom and the knowledge of young people, and how do we activate that strong spirit of community service that Eleanor spoke about so eloquently?
Yeah, and I'll also add, like, the founded by a 22-year-old, George Williams in London, England during the Industrial Revolution, who saw a need in his community and said, everyone's working 16-hour shifts. They're away from their families in the countries. There's no sense of community. There's not a place for us to come together and nurture our mind, body, and spirit. And that was his vision. I want to create a space to create that community. So, you know, that's a really interesting question, because I think in nonprofits in general and organizations, our origins are grassroots, they're volunteer-based, they're youth-led. And over time, as we've grown and we've professionalized and we're a lot staff heavier than we used to be in terms of volunteers, that's also, you know, as one of the largest nonprofits in the country and the world, is also a part of our history that is really important for us to know. That, you know, Katie, we're not saying let's do away with programs and service delivery. I think that's still an important need for that. Obviously, it's you know, we wouldn't be successful if there wasn't a need for it. I think what we're looking at is, how do we recognize that young people are important contributors to our organization? They'll make us more relevant. Our demographics are changing quickly. Community needs are changing quickly. I mean, this year, more than ever, right? You asked me, how are you, one day to the next, and the answer can be totally different depending on what's going on in the world. And young people are really in touch with that, with pressing social issues. And if we don't create those spaces to see young people as contributors and not just, you know, bring them in as tokens and say, hey, we got a young person, we're good, you know, they looked at this, but looking at meaningfully and authentically engaging young people as contributors and as part of decision making, then we won't stay relevant as an organization. And that's not just for young people, that's also for other groups that are underrepresented among leadership levels. And I know these are conversations we're constantly thinking about, constantly having. So it's a balance. But
yeah, and just to add one thing to what was shared, you know, 3 of our most impactful, exciting YMCAs, Colombia, Kosovo, and Liberia, are really 80% led by youth volunteers at the grassroots. They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the fee generating income that sustains their work. It's really all youth activism. And so one of the really important reasons for these global summits is that it kind of exposes young leaders from across 6 continents to different approaches to YMCA leadership and community engagement. And so a lot of that youth empowerment engine is driven by other parts of the world, not just by the United States, which is really exciting to see. I think we're learning from that. And what gives me hope is, especially looking at the last year, is young people led a lot of the really difficult change here over the past years, especially with addressing racism, not just COVID. And I believe in the generation today to lead more change to bring us to a better future.
Thanks, Tom. And I see a question from Ross as well. I think there's a roadblock with quote unquote established people giving young people power. Maybe it's a fear of perceived inexperience, et cetera. How can we help people do that more? And that's a great question. If I had an answer to that, Ross, we probably wouldn't be here today. But I think there are a few thoughts I have on the subject. One, recognizing that these efforts need to be intergenerational. We're not saying like, hey, give all the young people the keys and like kick everyone else out, right? Obviously, we value the importance of experience and wisdom of established leadership. It's about how do we partner together, recognizing that we bring different contributions and skill sets to the table, and together we can make more progress and be more relevant in the priorities and our mission that we all care about, we all want to see grow, as opposed to coming from this place of, I always say, you know, are we coming from a place of fear or a place of abundance, right? Do we recognize we have all these talents and assets that we can leverage in the best way to build the communities we want to live in? Or are we coming from a place of fear of, you know, being ousted or fear of not, I don't know. I think that's an important question that we're continually asking ourselves, and we haven't quite figured out yet, but you're giving us some really good thoughts. So I know with that, we're running out of time here, and think, you know, we could talk about this forever. We're all very excited about this topic, but Alden, I know you want to wrap us up and close us out. So I'll turn it over to you, and just want to say thank you to this whole group for joining us today for this really important conversation. This is just one milestone on our journey. So we'd love to stay connected as we continue to learn from each other and with each other. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adriana, Eleanor, and Tom. Also, what a fabulous note to end on, right? Like, how are we working and thinking from places of abundance rather than places of fear? I really appreciate and love that. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today on another Wednesday Spark session. Next week, again, we have Kim Hunt from Pride Action Tank, who's going to be talking through how to use storytelling as a sort of activism tool, and a tool that can really shift how we're approaching policy. So it'll be next Wednesday, same time, 1 p.m. I'm sending the link in the chat. And this session was recorded, so everyone will be followed up with an email. We'll have the recording. And Adriana and Tom, we would love to share some resources and links to any of these sort of programmings that are coming up from the Y that folks in this call can get involved in and be a part of. And yeah, thank you again, Eleanor. It was great seeing you and hearing about the project that you're working on. And yeah, this partnership between DFA and the YMCA has continued to be so generative and operates from a place of abundance, I think. So again, thanks all for your time, and we're excited to keep moving forward with all of the different projects that we're doing with the YMCA. So thanks everyone, have a great afternoon, get outside, go on a walk if it's warm out, and we'll hopefully see you next week.